But I'd really like to introduce Dave. This is a great presentation. So Dave is a superintendent of Victoria Police. I won't give his normal bio stuff. He also chairs the Australia-New Zealand Society of Evidence-Based Policing. But the question for all of us now is, you hear this stuff, what you're going to do about it. And Dave is a perfect exemplar of someone who goes, okay, I get this. It's not all about strategy and governance. It's actually going out and doing something as a sort of mid-ranking police officer, in your case, Victoria. And he's just going to talk through some of his experiences, really. And it's a challenge to all of us around when we go back to work. Okay, so what are we going to do to advance knowledge and therefore change what we do to become more professional?
So, yeah, this isn't a technical presentation. It's more about not the what is evidence-based policing, but the how. And through my experience in trying to lead evidence-based work. And I suppose it's a bit of a contrast from the last presentation, which was an organisational structural approach. This is more an individual one. So just to start with, I want to start with something a little bit abstract to open up the thinking. And you may have heard this before, but the Royal Society in the UK is a fellowship of the world's most eminent scientists. And their motto is nullus in verba, which simply means take nobody's word for it. Now, that motto is an expression of the determination of the fellows to withstand the domination of authority and to verify all statements by an appeal to the facts as determined by the evidence. And I share that with you as a relevant lead-in to my presentation because I think EBP shares a very similar philosophy, whilst at the same time there are some limitations to that philosophy within the context of an operational environment. How? Well, firstly, there is a paucity of evidence in policing. Not everything is capable of being referenced back to the evidence. And the movement towards evidence-based policing and the application of science and research to policing has not historically been a smooth path. The question is, how can we make progress along that path? If you think about other professions, 50 years ago, nurses were seen as bed changers. Ambulance officers were seen as stretcher carriers. And when you think about those professions, what makes those professions professional is the evidence upon which their craft is based. So where are we at in policing? Well, a cynical view may suggest that, put simply, police don't like research. Police don't particularly engage with it and they find it irrelevant. That's a bit harsh, but it is a view. It's fair to say police are pragmatic and we often reject the theoretical for the practical, jumping in and doing stuff. The pace at which police are required to respond is often said to be inconsistent with research. When we respond with an operational strategy, we rarely design it in a way that it can be tested, and we just tend to jump in, and before you know it, we're on to the next one. You know, Jerry Ratcliffe refers to this as under 10 football, where we sort of all jump on the ball and then just kick down the field and we do it all over again. Police have traditionally been poor consumers of research, and historically police have not owned their science nor developed a culture that values research. But at a more basic level, as Professor Cynthia Lum says, does research even have a seat at the table? And it's a very good question because it implies that research needs to be at the table, but also there are many seats at the table, and that's true for policing. But I actually think that there's a less cynical approach to where we're at. SEBPs are expanding the reach of evidence-based policing. So is this program, which is sending police out across the globe equipped with the skills to do the job. A few years ago, we had our last conference in person. 200 people turned up at Canberra. We were forced to go online. 2,500 police turned up and academics from every state and territory in Australia, from Commissioner to Constable. And we communicated the evidence out there. And this year, we're taking it one step further. Alex, the UK Society and the Australian Society are joining up along with Canada and US. And we're going to run a 24-hour conference, okay? So policing is 24 hours. You can be anywhere in the world. On night shift, you can jump in if your agency signs up. And just a quick little grab, if there are any chief officers in the room or anyone with influence over chief officers, we need to get you signed up for a package so everyone in your agency can participate. And I just found it extraordinary at my work. I looked around at people watching it, doing at all times of the day and afternoon. It was good to see. So Alex and I are welcome to discussions after this. So that's the heavy stuff. Let me jump into some of these trials. That's our executive committee in Australia, and we've got a lot of senior representatives, which is good. So I'm going to talk to you about 4 trials around legitimacy, preventing serious public violence, how to prevent crime before it happens, and reducing arrest. So let's jump into the first one. Victoria had the longest lockdown in the world, and police had a very big enforcement role. Police issued 50,000 fines, $1,652 for not complying with Chief Health Officer directions. So my question was, how can we actually... I'm in the thick of it. I'm the police commander for our response for half of Melbourne. We have to do this, but how can we do it in a way that doesn't erode trust? That was my question. So what did I do? And you'll find this with all the ones I present. The first question is, what is the evidence? What does the evidence say? And there's good evidence around procedural justice, right? Showing respect, allowing people to speak, being neutral, not assuming they've done something wrong, and showing trustworthy motives, showing that you were actually in it for the right reasons. So we looked at the evidence. The next thing I did was ring Sarah Bennett, who's here, Dr. Sarah Bennett. Campbell Collaboration, I see Peter chuckling up there. That was what we went to, and I've done that on a number of occasions. Go there and look at it, okay? It's really good. Pick the phone up to Sarah and Lorraine. How can we do this? This is the next tip. Use academics. They are incredibly generous with their time. They didn't ask for money, they just helped us, okay? So, and they came up with PACT. This is what we'll give the police, right? Explain your purpose when you're talking to someone about compliance. Acknowledge the situation, be neutral, allow them to speak, seek their cooperation and thank them. It's really important at the end of that exchange, whatever it is, to say, please keep yourself and your family safe and do the right thing, showing trustworthy motives. Next question is, how do we test it? How do we test it? All right, we'll get a survey, half the officers will be trained in this PACT approach and half will do what they normally do. And they can give out these surveys and we can get some sense of whether a procedural justice approach influences the way the public responds. So, very interestingly, half the respondents spoke a language other than English at home. It was a very diverse group, and I think half of them were born overseas, I think, or nearly half. I'll fly to this one here. This was just sort of like, how do you perceive the police role? Encouraging to follow the directions rather than to give fines. They didn't see it that we were just out there to give fines, so that was a good start. But let's get to the main game, which is this one here. Now, this is the group of officers who were trained, okay? These guys were trained to actually interact with the public using the planks of procedural justice, okay? And on that scale, you can see over 4 to 4.5, they treated me fairly, they were polite, they were trustworthy, they explained it, respectful, they allowed me to speak, they cared about me and listened to me, okay? So that's the group that got trained. Now this is an evidence-based role. We need to compare it to another group. How does it compare to the other group? I don't have that slide, because what happened is that the officers that weren't trained didn't give the tickets out. Now what does that say? Why didn't they give the tickets out? Why did the officers who got trained in it feel that it was appropriate to give it out? I was literally picking the keys up off my desk to go to the stations and get the sergeants together and say, guys, just give the tickets out, right? Give them a rev, okay? This is what you do in a trial. You've got to make it work. And that day, all restrictions were lifted. So all those police went back to their normal job. I was the only person in Victoria wanting lockdown to continue longer. So is it a failed experiment? Is it implementation failure? It's probably over-ambition. You know, I had a lot of work to do. We had a ring of steel around the state, we had a state border, all these things, mobilise these police, put them in tents up the bush. Anyway, we had to go. And we learnt something from it. Right, next one. Warrants. Using behavioural science. So, look, when COVID happened, the courts just stopped. That was their strategy. Just stop and let the cases pile up. Our prosecutor's office physically ran out of space to store all the cases, right? Because, they just kept coming in, but courts weren't doing anything. People are disengaging with the court process. There's a really strong risk that warrants are going to go through the roof. People are going to fail to appear, okay? So how can we get people to... it's in no one's interest when there's a failure to appear. Loss of court time, everyone's time, right? So what's the evidence? Looked at a randomised trial in New York which reduced the incidence of warrants through providing better information. So just very quickly, look, make it simple. That's probably the answer. Make it simple and tell people the correct information, okay? So that's our summons, 2,000 words. I was a prosecutor for 5 years. I've never read it, right? And it's complex language. And not only is it complex, it actually is misleading, right, about warrants. How can we make it easier? So that's the form we designed, right? Now, the police don't have to do anything. When they print out the summons, it just prints out. The only thing police have to do is not throw it in the bin, okay? QR codes to legal aid. This is what to do when you go to court, okay? And all the information they need, okay? So that's good. How are we going to test it? Well, we've turned it on for kids, but for adults, it's either one of two. We're about to flick the switch. We've got the opportunity to run at 33 stations and match those stations to another matched pair design. But I'm not giving up. I'm going to talk to our forms man to see if he can sort of pick odd and even days of birth or something to try and randomise it in some way. But we're going to try and test it in some way. You've got to just do what you can do, okay? Not everything's perfect, but we'll have a crack. So that's another one we've got going. Hotspots, okay. So Justin Reedy, Dr. Justin Reedy's here. I probably ring Justin every week, multiple times a week. What about this? What about that? So we generally define hotspots as larger areas. I won't go bang on about the strategy so much. You know what the strategy is. Just a couple of points. We looked at pre-COVID data, half of Melbourne, 36,000 street segments, every street, every lane, right? 36,000 street segments, 100,000 crimes, 100,000 calls from the public and 42,000 crimes, right? On average, about 150 metres. Concentration of crime to place, okay? 1% of street segments out of 36,000, so 360, is a quarter of all crime, okay? A quarter of all crime. And about 5% is half of all crime. And very similar for the calls, the CAD, okay? It's similarly concentrated. So that's consistent. That's consistent with a lot of jurisdictions. And it's amazing that sort of concentration occurs. Some interesting questions. Why does crime... People say, well, why? Police say, well, why does crime occur in these places? Crime occurs in these places, you guys know this, because that place has the bespoke ingredients for crime. It has the motivated offenders, it has the vulnerable victims, it has the lack of guardianship. And when those factors come together at a certain time, in a certain place, crime happens. And I just think about one of these locations. When I was a constable, you have a kebab bar here, you have the exit of a nightclub there, you've got the entrance to a car park there at 1 o'clock in the morning. Guess what? All those factors are there. They were there 30 years ago and they're probably going to be there for a long time, okay? That's why crime happens. This is really interesting. What proportion are cold 2 out of 3 of those 36,000 street segments, about 64% or something, have 0 crime in a year. 2 out of 3 street segments have 0 crime. 80% of street segments have 1 crime or 0. Right? So there's a lot of cold spots for crime. Why would I send a police car down there? I had this bizarre calculation on the plane. I added up the length. It's about 5,500 kilometres of street segments, and 2 kilometres of it is our top locations, right? So why would you send a police car down that street? Why wouldn't you send them to the place where they're most likely to come across crime and harm? Are they stable? Well, guess what? They're stable. We ran stability analysis. They're stable throughout the year. They don't all happen at the same time. How variable it is on the map. As David Weisberg has said, there are good streets in bad neighbourhoods and there are bad streets in good neighbourhoods. They are spread out over the map. Okay, so and really interestingly, our top 200 out of 36,000, our red streets, we call them, so these are the top streets in rank order for crime and CAD, often intersect with a green street with 1 crime or less. What's going on? Why doesn't it spill over into those locations? It's not in that side street because that side street doesn't have the ingredients for crime. It doesn't have the souvlaki bar. They might walk through there, but it's that spot that attracts the crime. So you need to be surgically precise as to where you put your police. I better keep moving because I can talk a lot. Not so much a strategy. How are we telling the officers to do it? Basically assume when you have a strategy, the police will not do what you tell them. That's the starting point for everything, okay? And in fact, take it out of their hands like the warrants thing, just make it happen. So really, they get their electronic task. This tells them what to do. Engage with people at the place. Talk to people. Talk to the public. Talk to the place keepers. Talk to the transit staff. Get out and about. Get off your phones. I talk to the sergeants. Guys, it's simple. Get out of the bloody car and talk to people, right? That's the strategy. Simple. Old school policing, walk around and talk to people, right? Research scares them, but you always bring it back to old school policing. They like that. So that's that. And also tell them what goes on there. As Simon just pointed out, police think they know what goes on where all the hotspots are, but they don't. So every street, every segment we're deploying them to, where to go, what to do. Look at this. This is one. Young victims, students at risk of gang-related violence or robbery. Guess what? At 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Probably a good time to go there, guys. Okay? Maybe get there a bit earlier, you know. So tell them what happens in the place. And then also, we're also linking live intelligence. Yesterday there was a robbery here, and here's a picture of a head of someone that you should keep an eye out for. Okay? So live intelligence, give them the data, tell them what to do, and track them. As I said, assume they won't do it. 2 ways of tracking them. We've turned on this technology. I basically assumed it wouldn't work. So my backup plan was this. Always have a backup plan. I have said you must turn on your body-worn camera for the entire duration of the patrol and categorise it in a unique way. That way we can jump in and have a look at it. What were they doing? I don't assume they know, all police know how to conduct a good proactive patrol. So we're going to have a library of these videos and we'll be able to look at them. Okay? But it's a bit of a nudge. Some of them didn't like it, but it's not a popularity contest. All right. Violence. Everyone loves reducing violence on the street. How are we going for time? 23, got about 5 minutes. All right. Focused deterrence. The strategy basically with focused deterrence is to increase that person's perception of risk around apprehension to deter them, okay? These were home visits. Here's the conversation, right, when the police go. Just for interest, the uniform youth officers did under 24-year-olds and detectives did over 24-year-olds. You're not in trouble with the police, but you have been involved in a number of serious incidents. If you commit more crime, you're actually on our radar and you will get caught. Okay, we're telling you straight. And we don't want you to go down that path. But if you do go down that path, you've got a very high chance of going to jail because you've already had some serious incidents. And if you go to jail in Victoria, you've got a 50% chance of going back to jail within 2 years. We don't want you to do that. Use coming out of COVID as an opportunity to make the right decisions, create a turning point to do the right thing. And then there's a letter. Talk to your family about that. If your family come to the door, mum, dad, boyfriend or girlfriend, talk to them as well. Talk to them as well. Once again, Peter, you'll be happy. Campbell Collaboration. He's putting thumbs up. Go to the evidence. What does the evidence say? This was my interpretation of what focused deterrence was. So what we did, what did we do? So, locked myself away with an analyst. 1,000 offenders were identified, okay, ultimately. They had to have had multiple incidents, multiple involvements in serious public violence, okay? So this is carjacking, home invasion, conduct endangering life, robbery, armed robbery. Not one incident, multiple incidents in the preceding 3 years. Interestingly, when you look at that group, we've got 1,000, right? 75% of them had more involvements in other crime. They weren't specialists in violence. Only a very small number only had violent offences. They're actually just opportunistic offenders, okay? So we did the cohort sort of analysis, selection. We did the characteristics of it. We then randomised them. Interestingly, I wanted to know, does this magic, this magic they talk about in randomisation, does it work? So before we even started, I'll just quickly show you a couple of graphs. And then really important, as I said, tracking. It should be, like it's got to be the top priority. We gave them the lists, 7 detective units, there's your 50, there's your 90, in each detective unit, weekly meetings. They've done 40, you've done 2. What the hell's going on, right? So every one of those, and a return for every visit, right? We need that bit of paper back. And if they're not home, you've got to go back and find them when they are home, okay? So strong tracking, which was good, and it's a point of analysis along the way, okay? Testing, okay, 1,000 offenders, randomly put them into 2 groups, 500 and 500. We are now 500 days post. We can have a look at some of the data, okay, to get some understanding of whether it works. So I'll show you that now. And also, it's not all just about the high-end statistics. Got everyone together, and Justin conducted a debrief. And guess what? Someone said I was really surprised. They were very respectful encounters. And we got them to grade the encounters. 80% of the encounters were respectful, Sometimes they were stuck at the door 15 minutes. You couldn't get away, okay? So the day you arrest someone with their hands, with their face on the pavement and dragged out of a stolen car is not a great day to engage with an offender about their offending. But outside a time of crisis, I think it provides an opportunity. So, just very quickly, randomly put them into 2 groups. Guess what? The age is the same. Even the geographical numbers across the distribution across the various areas were the same. Age, gender. Basically, it works. But the most important stat was that the rate of repeat offending was basically the same, because that's what we're looking at, okay? So what were the results? You're not going to fall off your chair here, but this is like purely the 500 and the 500, okay? Not a lot. The blue line is the treatment group, and the red line is the control group. Now, it's not significant, but I wanted to get some more insights into this, because there was a bit of attrition. I've looked at the stats again, and we got to less than half, okay? Now, I want to know, for the people that got the pill, can I get some more insights? Now, the ones we missed, basically the biggest number was they don't live there anymore. The address was wrong. Maybe the police recorded it wrong. Maybe they never lived there. Who knows? The other one was they didn't actually complete all the visits. There was about 10% they didn't complete. Maybe they were down the street getting milk. I don't know, but they didn't get the pill, right? So let's look at the ones. So then I thought, okay, I need to get more. I can't just give up there, right? So let's have a look a little bit deeper. Okay, all right. You see you've got two red lines? One is the control group and the other one are the people that we couldn't deliver the message to. And now we see that for the criteria offences, serious public violence, there's something going on there. Every crime against the person, there's something happening there, and for all offences as well. This is helpful for me as an operational superintendent, because I know that next time when I do it, I can reduce the attrition. I know ways to reduce the attrition before we start allocating them, so I need to understand this. And then we also looked at it across who was more responsive to the treatment. Was it prolific offenders or non-prolific offenders? Was it younger offenders or older offenders? Was it offenders with less co-offenders in their history or more? Okay, so there's a bit in all that. But basically, this is an easier way for me to understand it. Out of 100 offenders who got the pill and 100 offenders who didn't, they're the top 18 categories of crime in Victoria, and every one of them are lower, okay? Assault, 49 to 26, right? They're all lower. Aggravated burglary, 15 to 11. So it gives me something to think about. And I'm working with Justin Reedy and Barak to try and pull a paper together on this. So we'll see how we go there. So that's that one. And there's more other ways to look at it. Okay, and we also looked at network analysis. Half of the 500 offenders were connected in a single group. These trials didn't happen in a vacuum, right? They're in an operational environment. And this is where we need to seize the opportunities and join the dots. To say, hang on a minute, can we test this? Secondly, they all started with the fundamental question, what is the evidence? What is the evidence? But I just want to finish with this, okay? This is my final wrap-up, right? So drawing on my experience in speaking to people across the globe about EBP and doing this work, one of the criticisms of EBP is, how is it relevant to operational policing? And the question I pose to you is, were those trials that you just heard about, put your operational policing hat on, were they relevant? And if the answer is no, well, that's bad luck for me. But if the answer is yes, why? Why do you feel they're relevant? And it's probably, if you're looking at it through an operational lens, it's probably more the innovation that these trials bring and not so much the methodology. To be honest, most police don't care about a methodology, but they do care about a really innovative practice that helps them with a complex police problem. It's not that the methodology is not important, it underpins it, it gives it its value. And this is what David Kennedy said to me when I interviewed him. He's the lead scholar on focused deterrence. He said, yes, we need to be more rigorous in policing, but more rigorous about our role in producing the treatments we can test. More rigorous about being innovative and bringing new ideas into policing. And I thought that was very good, okay? So let's just wrap this up. So what about the path ahead for EBP and policing? I started with something a little bit abstract, I'll finish with something a little bit abstract. A few years ago, Larry took us to Darwin College, right, for dinner, which was very nice. Why am I telling you about that? Darwin's theory of evolution is fundamentally how an organism or a species adapts. So what is a successful adaptation, drawing on that theory? Just give us a little bit of inspiration. A successful adaptation enables an organism or species to thrive in a changing and challenging environment. But here's the really important point. But in order for that adaptation to occur, the organism needs to sustain itself for periods in a stressed state in order that it can come out the other side changed anew. So for real change, for significant adaptation, it's as though there needs to be a productive range of discomfort in order to enable the change to occur. I have a saying, if there's no pushback, there's no change. Pushback is a symptom of people adapting. So if EBP is to continue down the path of progress, at times there'll need to be that disruption. And it doesn't mean it's going to be a smooth path, and you may have to be that disruptor. Or put another way, we may need to disappoint people at a rate they can absorb in order to drive that change. I make this final point about that change process. Agencies in the main aren't driving evidence-based policing, probably with the exception of New Zealand and the Met. Passionate individuals are. And here's my point, particularly to those that are driving EBP. They can't pull the train alone. So to my comrades in the room, the police students, sorry to disappoint you. Your work on evidence-based policing doesn't finish when you push submit on your thesis. It's just the start. You are the future, okay? You will make it happen. And it's probably not through your technical knowledge, it's through your leadership. My saying is that we're all activists. The problem is we're all waiting to be activated. Well, the students, you have been activated by doing this course. So pick up the rope and help pull the train, because the world needs you and I to do that more often than we do.
I was with Dave. We're speaking to a load of violence suppression unit officers in the Met only last week. And it answers your question around what has evidence-based policing got to do with operational deployment. And these guys are stopping and searching in some of the hardest places in London. And I said to them, look, do you go wisely, but can you just say this one thing to the person you're stopping and searching? And it's that the hardest part of your job is telling a mum or dad they've just lost a son, or it's doing CPR on a knife victim. That's the motivation part of procedural justice that we know builds legitimacy. And I didn't say any of that other stuff. I didn't mention a randomised control trial. I didn't mention PJ. I didn't mention legitimacy. I just said, do that one thing. And that at its bare minimum is evidence-based policing driving operational activity to improve trust and confidence.